Hey, all, welcome back to another episode of Well Lit Path. In Psalm 120, we see that in the midst of tumult, God grants ultimate peace. But first, how was your week? My granddaughter just had her first birthday. And I mean, she's one of the many joys in my life. Watching her little personality develop, I can already tell. She's going to be quirky and funny, just like her parents. There's something about that age where everything is new and exciting, and the whole world feels like it exists just to be explored. And y'all know how much I love all my grandchildren. But this week we had a quiet little get together for her. Nothing over the top, just us and mom and dad and baby and a cake. And, she had no idea she was the guest of honor. But when she dug into that cake with her tiny little fists, intent on mashing it into the most squishy mess she could possibly achieve, it kind of struck me like she doesn't have a care in the world. She doesn't worry about tomorrow. She doesn't think about what might go wrong. She doesn't carry responsibility on her shoulders. Her parents and the people who love her carry all of that for her. And that's what it was like for us too when we were kids. I know for some of us, we may have to reach further back than others, but just go back as far as you need to. Remember when going to bed at night and the biggest worry you had was what you were going to play the next day or who you were going to play with? Were you going to set up your dollhouse in the living room or the bedroom? Would you make mud pies or would you sling mud with your friends? Was it going to be a day in the woods with sticks as swords or riding bikes until the sun started to set? We should probably get our kids back into that kind of play, but I guess that's a different podcast. There should have been an overarching theme in those years, though, if we had a normal childhood. And that should be that we didn't have a care in the world. Now, I know that not everyone had that kind of childhood. And if you didn't, listen, I'm truly sorry. Some people grew up far too fast. Some folks carried things they never should have had to carry. This episode has something for you. Because God, the perfect Father, calls us to rely on Him, to cast our cares on Him, to come to Him with the same kind of trust a child has. Somewhere along the way, we stopped living like that. We started believing that every burden is ours to hold, every outcome ours to manage, every worry is ours to solve. And before we know it, we're walking around with all this inner turmoil because we've taken on responsibilities that were never meant to crush us. God desires peace for His children. Not a careless life, not an unaware life, but a life of trust. And our psalmist has something to say about that this week. Let's take a look. Psalm 120, beginning in verse 1. In my distress, I cried unto the Lord, and He heard me. Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given unto thee? Or what shall be done unto thee, thou false tongue? Sharp arrows of the mighty with coals of juniper. Woe is me that I sojourn in Mesech, that I dwell in the tents of Kedar. My soul hath long dwelt with him that hateth peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. It would be so easy to open this psalm this week and immediately start drawing lines from its words to headlines scrolling across our screens. You read about dwelling among those who hate peace, about deceitful tongues, about conflict and unrest, and your mind almost instinctively runs to global instability, to wars and rumors of wars. I get it. I understand that instinct. We live in a time where information is constant. Every hour brings a new development, a new analysis, a new prediction. And it can leave even the most grounded believer feeling unsettled. But I want us to slow down for a moment. Because while this psalm certainly resonates with the tension of living in a hostile world, it wasn't written to feed our anxiety about the rise and fall of nations. It was written to anchor us in something far deeper than the shifting landscape of human power. The psalm begins with a cry, not a political strategy, not a defensive posture, a cry. And there is something about that that should root us. When surrounded by conflict, by slander, by opposition, his first movement isn't outward, but upward. He cries unto the Lord. And that's where we have to begin as well. Many believers today feel an undercurrent of uncertainty. Maybe we wouldn't even call it fear. Maybe we'd say that it's concern. Maybe we'd say that it's vigilance. But if we're honest, there's a low hum of anxiety that can begin to define the background noise of our lives. What if this escalates? What if this nation moves? But the psalm reminds us of something eternal. The Lord hears. He hears when we cry. He hears when confusion swirls around us. He hears when lies are spoken about us. He hears when truth is twisted. He hears when we feel outnumbered. But more than that, he delivers. Our grounding is not in the stability of world peace. It's not in the strength of our nation. It's not in the accuracy of analysts or the optimism of commentators. Our grounding is in the eternal sovereignty of God. He sets up kings and kingdoms. He removes kings and kingdoms. He ordains nations. He allows their decline. That truth alone should quiet our hearts. When media outlets spin narratives and offer interpretations, it can be tempting to let our emotions follow the loudest voice. That may cause fear to rise. That may cause anger to begin to simmer. We begin to feel that we must respond with the same intensity that we see around us. But the psalmist speaks of deliverance from lying lips and deceitful tongue. Do we realize what a gift that is? We live in an age of information saturation. But information is not the same thing as truth. Opinions aren't truth. Spin isn't truth. Algorithms are not truth. We have something infinitely more stable than commentary. We have the fully revealed Word of God. Every morning, every evening, every moment in between, we can open the scriptures and hear unfiltered, undistorted truth. Not trending truth, not popular truth, not strategic truth, eternal truth. When deceitful tongues speak, we are not helpless. We are not adrift. We have an anchor. The psalmist references Meshech and Kedar. These were not neutral territories. They were associated with hostile powers. Meshech is connected with Magog. Kedar descended from Ishmael. These names represented tension, opposition, and enmity toward Israel. He felt surrounded by those who did not share his love for God. And if we're honest, we feel that way a lot too. We're surrounded by ideologies that oppose righteousness. We're surrounded by cultural narratives that elevate self above God. We are surrounded by philosophies that celebrate pride, autonomy, and individualism at any cost. The God of ego speaks loudly in our age. You deserve, you define, you decide, you reign. And those messages are not neutral. They are at war with the spirit who dwells within the believer. We're engaged in spiritual warfare every day. It's not always dramatic. It's not always visible, but it is very real. The accuser whispers. Our flesh resists. Principalities and powers influence the atmosphere of our culture. Righteousness and unrighteousness do not coexist peacefully. They are at war. The unbelieving world is at enmity with God. And while that statement is harsh, it should be, because it is a biblical reality. The natural heart resists divine authority. Humanity has a written history in defiance of its creator. Kingdoms rise on pride. Empires expand through conquest. Leaders grasp for control. War is the language of fallen humanity. But here's the part that changes everything. But God. Those two words reshape the entire story. Humanity was at war with God, not the other way around. We rebelled. We sinned. We chose ourselves. And yet God did not respond with annihilation. He responded with sacrifice. He desired peace so deeply that he secured it himself. It was not negotiated. Peace was purchased. He made peace through the blood of the cross. That truth steadies us when the world feels unstable. Because the greatest war has already been resolved. We were once enemies. We neglect that, and I want you to let it sink in for a moment. We were not neutral observers. We were not mildly distant. We were enemies in our hearts and our minds by wicked works. But through Christ, we can be reconciled. We can have peace with God. And if we have peace with God, what ultimate threat remains? Yes, nations may rage. Yeah, culture may shift. Sure, hostility may increase. But the war that mattered most has already been won. That's why this psalm, though filled with tension, ultimately leads us to hope. And there's another layer here that I don't want us to miss. Psalm 120 is one of the Song of Degrees, the pilgrim psalm. These were sung by Israelites as they journeyed up to Jerusalem for the appointed feasts. Imagine families traveling dusty roads, singing together as they ascended toward the temple. From every region, every tribe, converging on one city to worship the Lord. These psalms were reminders that no matter where they lived, no matter who ruled over them, no matter what tumult surrounded them, their true center was Jerusalem. But even more than that, their true hope was not ultimately the earthly city. Like Abraham, their pilgrimage was toward a city whose builder and maker was God. They were pilgrims. And so are we. Is this not our story? We sing about it in our own hymns, Beulah land, I'm longing for you. I'm just a pilgrim in search of that city. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop. Why do those lyrics stir something in us? It's because in our hearts we know that we do not belong fully here. We're grateful for our home. We're thankful for our churches. We love our families. We labor faithfully. But this world is not our final address. Paul expresses clearly his own desire to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And there's a longing there, a holy homesickness. And yet he also understood that remaining meant fruitful labor. God had purpose in his staying. And that's our reality. That's our blessing. That's our purpose. We long for the fullness of peace in his presence, but we labor for his glory here. The psalmist longed to go to Jerusalem. He longed to gather with those who loved the Lord as he did, but he was hindered geographically and by hostile neighbors. He felt stuck in a place that did not reflect his heart. And haven't we felt that? You look around and you think to yourself, this isn't home. You hear conversations that mock holiness. You watch decisions that celebrate rebellion. And you sense and see a cultural drift away from truth. And there's this quiet ache. But I want us to notice something profound here in this psalm. When he could not physically reach the temple, he reached the Lord in prayer. And in doing so, he found peace. The physical gathering was precious. The corporate worship was meaningful, but the presence of God was not confined to Jerusalem. In his isolation, in his tension, in his distress, he discovered that Jehovah himself was his peace. Sometimes we think peace requires ideal circumstances. If only the culture shifted. If only our leaders would make better solutions and decisions. If only hostilities would cease. But the psalmist found something deeper. He found peace not in the absence of conflict, but in the presence of God. And that's available to us right now. We wrestle daily against our flesh. Our own desires can lie to us. Our hearts can rationalize sin. The accuser can dredge up shame. Society can applaud what God condemns. There's constant pressure. But when we turn to the Lord, when we fix our minds on his truth, when we cry out to him, he gives peace. Not denial, not escapism, peace. The world often speaks of peace, but it defines it as the absence of conflict. The Bible defines peace as a right relationship with God. The world hates peace with God. It tolerates many spiritualities. It celebrates self-defined morality. But peace that requires surrender to Christ, well, that's offensive. When we speak of peace through Jesus, some will answer with war. That's what the psalmist experienced. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Is that not still true? Speak of reconciliation with God, and some respond with hostility. Speak of repentance, and some respond with accusation. Speak of holiness, and some respond with ridicule. But there will always be those who listen. And those who listen can find the same peace that we've found. The gospel is called the gospel of peace for a reason. Peace between man and God. Peace within the heart. Peace that steadies the soul when the world trembles. We're not called to mirror the anger around us. We're not called to escalate every cultural disagreement into personal outrage. We're called to speak peace. Not a passive peace, not a compromised peace, but the peace secured by Christ. How beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace. And when we think about that image, we can think about feet, dust covered from travel, pilgrims walking uphill toward Jerusalem, messengers crossing valleys and mountains. Beautiful feet are not polished, they are purposeful. They carry good news. And what is the good news? That the war with God can end. That reconciliation is available. That forgiveness has been purchased. And that the Prince of Peace reigns. Surrounded by enemies, in places that feel hostile, in seasons that feel uncertain, we can anchor ourselves in this. God is sovereign. Christ has secured peace. The Spirit dwells within us. Our destination is eternal. We're pilgrims. We sing on the way. We cry when distressed. We speak peace when others speak war. We cling to truth when others twist it. We labor faithfully while longing for home. And one day, the pilgrimage will end. The city we have sung about will be seen. The peace we have tasted will be complete. The warfare with our flesh will cease. And the accuser will be silenced forever. Until then, we ground ourselves not in headlines, not in speculation, not in fear, but in the unchanging character of God. When the world speaks war, we speak Jesus. When deceitful tongues rise, we open the word. When anxiety whispers, we cry unto the Lord. And he hears. He delivers. He gives peace. Thanks for walking with me a while as we read the word together. Won't you join me again next week, and we'll walk just a little further?
If you like the podcast, go ahead and hit that follow button. If you have any questions about salvation or general podcast questions, reach out to us via email at podcast@lakeworthbaptist.org. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Facebook by looking for LWBC_publications.